and again, we've talked about this. We talked about the breast cancer uh, potential, right? Because of all the images and the combination and the training of a AI ML engine with millions and millions and millions of images, so that it can, like you said, do this pixel by pixel evaluation in in the hopes of coming up with better prevention. So there's obvious a model for the processing of mega gigapixel imaging independent of what the imaging is. What about documentation? Because I see that as a problem too. I see doctors, I talk to doctors, we live here in Lake Nona, both you and I, we're surrounded by medical people. And just to be quite transparent, the average doctor doesn't have time to read everything that gets published in his field every day. It's just not the case. I mean, my father is an MD, as you know. He's semi-retired, and back in his days, when I was a little kid in the '70s, he used to attend 2 to 3 conferences a year. He would get journals in the mail, medical journals, and the combination of the conference and the journals gave him information that he needed in order to learn what's new in medicine, right? And then he talked to all his colleagues. They got together, they brainstormed, and then they went ahead and took care of their patients. Well, you fast forward to today, any given day, somewhere in the world, there's probably a couple of thousand peer-reviewed quality papers being published on any given topic within the field of medicine. How can a doctor in any discipline consume that information and make it useful in a way that it can impact his patients in a positive way? I don't see it without the use of technology. I'd like to get your thoughts on that.
I don't think it's possible without the use of technology, right? So, at least today, okay, so Deep Blue, you had to actually know how to play chess to win. Rules, you had to know the rules of the game. I would imagine the reinforcement learning of chess playing algorithms today just study how to play it and learn on their own. We have no idea how they make these decisions. We didn't tell them. It just saw the outcomes, right? You've heard of AlphaGo. All of these type of approaches are reinforced by just learning, by observing. We don't know how these things make the decisions, so they just know who won, who lost, and some kind of back propagated algorithm through the path of states that led to said outcome. And that's just, a more sophisticated average, basically, with a lot more dimensions that our little puny human brains can't measure. I mean, gigapixel pathology is gigapixel dimensions, right? I mean, you can't even think it out. But essentially, it's the average of some space that's the best estimate of true or false. That's what this is. An average is a linear, is in real number space. These averages are in words in the case of ChatGPT. What's the average sentence for some prompt? That's what ChatGPT is. It's the average order of the words given some other order of the words prompting. What we're talking about is the average of pixels, of images. And when you get to high dimensional space like this, you need a lot of data. And a lot of data, well, welcome to medicine, post-HIPAA, post-high-tech. There's a lot of data floating around, right? So I think, I just got teaching the first 5 days of medical school. My students have been here for 1 week. And not only us, but every medical school is accredited by the LCME, Liaison Committee for Medical Accreditation, LCME. Medical Education, LCME. So every med school. LCME is telling us today we are not teaching these students by lecture anymore. It is all case-based. They showed up on day one. We gave them a case. I didn't say a word. I just sat there, kind of facilitated the discovery and the curation of their own. Because it's almost impossible to go teach this information. I mean, outside, meiosis, mitosis, I'm a geneticist, A, T, C, and G. Outside the basic, which is like an alphabet, there's so much information. It really has to be, we have to teach them how to find it. Because it's going to change from this year to next year. The cancer drugs are going to be 20 more targets. Might be a whole new mechanism. It seems, it seems doctors and medical education is, in fact, I can tell you, medical education is has acknowledged that fact, that question you just asked, that this knowledge is it is intractable. Technology is going to have to be used. Today, that technology is Google. Tomorrow, it might be ChatGPT. Once we fix the hallucinations, right? And to be honest, ChatGPT can plan my lecture on meiosis and mitosis probably better than I can, and can outline it. What the average person asking that question and the average context of words, given some prompt. So I think that's the future. How do we use these tools? And ChatGPT is just another iteration of large language models. They've been around for quite a while. This one actually, documented what we've long thought. Just to kind of put this in context, imaging had its renaissance moment in 2012 when AlexNet beat the ImageNet competition. I think ChatGPT is the renaissance moment for text and natural language. There's bound to be other renaissance moments, whatever they are, we don't know yet. And I think, at least medical education has appreciated that we cannot deterministically cover every single epoch. It's just not. Who could predict this? Could you predict a year ago that ChatGPT would be done? And I study this, and I've been saying this for a while. I didn't believe myself. And then it kind of happened. So I'm in total agreement. LCME is in total agreement with you. I think the future is leveraging these technologies. I think it may be interesting to talk about medicine, what makes medicine so special, and why it may never work. If you ask me, this is never going to work, and we can talk about why, at least in medicine. It won't work for most people. It hasn't worked for most people. Because if you look at the outcomes of disease in America, it is very disparate, right? It is very inequitable for whatever reason. COVID is a great example, right? People get COVID taking the bus to Disney. So if you don't take the bus to Disney, which is called a social determinant of health, you're not going to get COVID. Guess who takes the bus to Disney, right? Right. So this is what makes this problem in America almost impossible to solve, if you ask me. Almost impossible to solve, because all you're going to do is exponentiate the biases we already see and clearly have documented, like taking the bus to Disney, right? Which has nothing to do with COVID, but that is the cause of why so many people that live in certain areas in Orlando have gotten COVID and others don't, because they're enriched for people that go work at Disney and physically have to go interact with the community. So I think that's a really hard problem, and that's a societal problem. That's a regulation problem. That's an FDA problem. That's that's a LCME problem. That's a community problem. That's a church problem. That's a school problem. That's a really intricate problem that I have realized it doesn't matter how much genetics, how much genomics, how much genome you sequence, can't really solve those problems without a different approach.
And there's another problem too, right? In parallel to that, which you can tell me if keep me honest here, that it's probably as important, which is the access to the data, right? I mean, you mentioned ChatGPT. ChatGPT can only do what it can do based on what it can access, right?
Yeah.
And AI imaging is the same way. So there's this issue of where's all the data that can be accessed, right? Because it seems to be in multiple different pockets
Correct.
throughout the internet. Some of those are
Well,
firewalled, right?
well, it depends. I think in America, this has to make somebody money for it to work. That's the definition of how our healthcare and everything in America works. It's a very capitalized system. The best AI, what does it do in medicine? It probably doesn't diagnose stuff. It conducts the commerce of medicine. We've shared the ICD and CPT code so we can charge each other for medicine. That works for everybody. There's no, when I say ICD, maybe let me explain, right? There is a international classification of disease for death on a bicycle by motor vehicle accident. That is a charge or something to that equivalent. Very, very detailed descriptors of how we can get paid in medicine. You know what there is not an ICD code for? Metastasis and recurrence of cancer. how are you going to model it, right? So, I mean, we have since communities have come together post-COVID. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but people don't really go to the doctor anymore. At least I go to the doctor once a year now for my kids, and it's telemedicine, bellyache is a telemedicine, rash is a telemedicine. There's really hardly any reason to go to the doctor anymore, at least, from my 1-year-old to my 16-year-old. And well, let's not talk about me. Right? So, yeah, so post-COVID, we had a lot of time to think about this. And the community came to the conclusion, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, we need to describe metastasis. We need to describe pharmacogenomic response, which drug, and so on and so forth. Not only the imaging, it's sort of this metadata, for now, is critical in training supervised machine learning, to be honest, which is what most of medical artificial intelligence and machine learning is. And there's just very little supervision. I think ChatGPT is showing us how we can use relatively unstructured. Well, it's not true. ChatGPT also is supervised. The order of words is supervised. We just write it, right? We don't realize that's. Well, maybe we do realize, but all ChatGPT predicts the next word most likely given, endless dimensions and configurations. So that needs to happen in medicine, and it is very slowly. What I find very interesting is we live in Florida, as you know. I find most people and most of the press and most of the sensationalism in this state is about masks and whether we should wear them or we should not wear them for COVID. It is not about access to mammograms and who has it and who doesn't have it, and if it's accurate for certain populations and inaccurate for certain populations. I think people would be stunned if they actually knew, what we all supposedly pay for. Like, our taxes pay for these public health policies that people have no clue for whatever reason. So I think as doctors, we have essentially failed our digital populations. There is no app in the million apps in Apple's App Store, which is a multi-trillion-dollar company, that you can really say is going to save lives. Maybe the Apple Watch, I'll give you that. This arrhythmia, I've seen a couple stories about that. But there's hardly any real impact in digital health thus far because of a number of reasons, most of them being capitalistic and lack of access to the data, except by the people that produce it that want to keep you coming back to them to produce more data, which means we're not going to easily share it with our competitors, except to bill, because all of us need to bill, right? So that's been my expectation, and I feel like it makes no sense because HIPAA gives patients the right to own and distribute their data, and high tech says everybody has to have an EHR. So we already have in place the regulatory mechanism for patients to share this data. In fact, HIPAA, there's healthcare information. The P in HIPAA is not privacy. Yeah, there's a privacy. I guess for portability. It was meant to share your data. It has not ended up as that. It has ended up as a bunch of privacy laws that are cited as to why we can't effectively share this data, unless we want to, which is what it ends up being, right? Unless we want to.
Unless the population agrees that every one of us wants our data to be shared.
Well, you can easily de-identify the data. HIPAA was intended for it to never be re-identifiable. I think what the future is going to be is, well, listen, this is my data. I should own it. Much like Google owns it, I should own it. If you notice, there's a huge push from these centralized networks with Twitter and Musk or X or whatever it's called, to Mastodon and decentralized networks, where we actually get to keep our data. Why? Because it's valuable. Clearly, it's valuable. So I think medicine, let's keep a focus on breast cancer. 1 in 2 women get a false positive for breast cancer, right? 1 in 2. So when you do get that result that may or may not be true, what do you do with it? You think you're going to go post your mammogram on Instagram and ask for advice from Instagram? No, that's terrible. I mean, that's also documented as misinformation and bad for your health. That's what I mean. Physicians have really failed their patients. What are you supposed to do with it? When all you really need is somebody else with a false positive to say, hey, that happened to me. 1 in 2 get this false positive. I mean, there's really no way. That social network doesn't exist yet. That could be on Mastodon very easily in a decentralized manner where you keep your data, right? So that's where I think this thing is going. I think what happened with COVID is a revelation of how things are. COVID was the most equitable, clinically tested disease or pandemic, I guess. If you look at cancer, cancer is not equitable at all. At all. I mean, and neither are the outcomes in patients. But barring these social determinants of health, I mean, how do you fix the problem of this bus and having to go to work if you work in fast food or in retail or whatever? But in terms of how the science was done, I think few people can argue that COVID was very, very well done. The vaccine was made to be equitable and to work in everybody. It was explicitly done because there was a lot of money to do it. So this just kind of just proves how this has to get done. It has to be from a top-down kind of approach, or driven sort of by the community and the patients that drove whether we wear masks in Florida or we don't wear masks in Florida, drove our policy. I don't see why patients, if physicians can provide services that sort of engage and educate our patients, I don't see why patients can't drive other more important aspects of medicine as well.
No, that's fantastic. I do agree with you. I foresee, or I have a dream of a world where there is a platform where I can put all of my medical records and that others can put all of their medical records. And its purpose is to perform correlation, causation analysis in an artificial intelligence way so that not only I'm benefiting from everyone else, but everyone else is benefiting because of me, because my grain of salt is one of hundreds of millions of records that then this engine is analyzing and then coming up with potential prevention, diagnosis, outcomes, and even treatments that then a doctor can then review, right? So in my mind, it's almost like you're old enough to remember the Jetsons, but it's I kind of see it that way, right? Where a doctor has access to this engine, and then behind this engine, there's multi platforms, right? One of them is the one that consumes all the medical records, right? Then on the other side is the one that's consuming all the medical reports and journals and papers and books, right? And then on the other side, it comes out chat GPT-esque recommendations that then the doctor can review. And then they can make a decision that
That's
is
right.
probably a lot more informed than the decisions they make today just because of how far they are from all that data and all that analysis. And that's
That's right.
again, that's that centaur that I talk about. But I feel like we're pretty far away from that. And not for technical reasons, but for other reasons. Do you agree?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Congress has done a report on what is called health information blocking. You can Google that. It is well known for reasons well beyond what HIPAA intended, which is the P is for portability. Information is siloed due to market forces, due to academic rivalries, all kinds of reasons that information can be weaponized relative to the intention of HIPAA, which is to improve healthcare outcomes for patients. Right. So again, I really think, and why I'm thankful and happy you invited me to speak is because I think doctors don't know. I think, med school has been such a task to cram all of this information, and that has been the medical education model for so long. To pass USMLE. Well, guess what can pass USMLE in the 90th percentile these days? ChatGPT. Right. So either which way, you're as good asking ChatGPT questions about the USMLE as you are anybody else who passes the USMLE at a 90th percentile. So this idea of hybrid artificial intelligence, you're absolutely right. We taught ChatGPT how to pass the USMLE, right? By reading all of the material that it was trained on up till 2021, right? It is practically impossible for any one human brain to do zero-shot learning on that scale of data. At least it's impossible for me. But now we can leverage ChatGPT because we taught it so much stuff that to do zero-shot learning, what happened in this, and this specific configuration of molecular markers and this specific configuration of population, we can do that kind of learning now because of the AI, because of the high dimensional space that our puny brains really just can't understand. Leave it alone. And this argument of a black box, we don't know what's going on. Do you know how the best pathologist in the world makes a decision about cancer or not cancer? We don't know. We have no idea. We trust his judgment. Same thing with at least with the technology, we can go in there and probe it, right? We can go in there. Before there was all these attention maps, there was saliency maps. You go probe the pixels in these, right? So I mean, obviously, I'm very bullish on this. I think this can only improve if developed appropriately. If not developed appropriately, you're going to have Henrietta Lacks 2.0, and we all know that ended.
Yep. Not
Right?
very well.
Not well. It depends on your perspective. They just settled out of court, so I hope that's what happens in medicine. I hope at some point we reach the point where there is transparency. There is, yeah. I mean, there is transparency, and there is an effect of said transparency where we improve outcomes, whatever that outcome can be. If Henrietta Lacks Cell started Regeneron and Thermo Fisher Scientific and whomever else that went on to do so much good, I mean, that has to be a transparent and acknowledged, right? If other people are expected that have had, I mean, imagine how many other people we don't know about whose cells have been, immortalized. I don't know if you're going to talk about Henrietta Lacks, but I think that's a good example. I think that is what's going to happen in the digital age if we, meaning physicians, don't really understand how this works, understand how this can help, how this can, more importantly, hurt our patients.
No, fantastic. Well, thank you, Dexter. This has been a good. We're out of time. Unfortunately, we can keep talking for another hour. Where can people find your work?
Well, I never really gave you three things. Let me give you three thoughts.
Please. Give me three thoughts for the audience on AI in medicine.
Yeah, three thoughts in AI medicine. I think in the age of data science, the scientific method is almost dead. Scientific method, and Wired wrote this up 10, 15 years ago. We have all the data to ask all the questions. We just don't ask the right questions. Right? Scientific data is come up with a hypothesis, go find the data, and then try to disprove your hypothesis. Well, the data is already there. Right? So this concept is relatively archaic, and doesn't make a lot of sense today, if you ask me. So scientific method is that we already have the data. We generate it by law. Yeah, we may not be able to get to it, but we got a ton of data. Right? So one. Two, AI works really well at one or two things. Right? If you give AI a bunch of data, it will consistently give you the right answer. Right? The problem is what we already touched on. Medicine in America is so variable depending on what population you feed in. Right? Depending on what population you fall in, medicine in America is extremely variable in how good and how well it performs. And that's what we're teaching the AI. And therein lies the problem, right? So unless we can fix that last bias, it's basically bias in, bias out, garbage in, garbage out, pick your favorite engineering analogy. That's exactly what's going to happen in medicine. It gives me a career to focus on, but I think it gives humanity something to think about, right? How this may not work out the way we expected it. We may get Henrietta Lacks 2.0, and that's not a good one. That robs the patrimony of everybody's pain and suffering, one, like hers and her family's. And two, that's not how this is going to work. I don't think that's how this is going to work. It makes no sense to think that machine learning for breast cancer mammography trained at Stanford or MIT, where you have very different populations and cancer biology of South Florida and Central Florida, it makes no sense to think that these places that are developing this knowledge, yeah, their patients are going to be fine, but ours, it's not expected to work, and the evidence suggests it's not going to work. Like, I know black women dying from breast cancer today. I don't know any white ones, right? I mean, that's a thing, and that's something that we really have to face as a society. And at some point, I hope this does come together, like it did for Henrietta Lacks, where this becomes transparent. This becomes studied beyond me. I like computers. This is an ethical problem. This is a societal problem, a regulation problem. All kinds of higher orders need to happen before this is going to make a lot of sense, I think, in our society for most people.
Excellent. Well, thank you again, Dexter. And then where can people find your work?
Oh, I'm one of the people that you can Google, or I'm actually on ChatGPT. It may or may not be accurate, but hadleylab.org is probably the easiest way to get in touch with me and kind of see what we're doing. Just Google me on ucfs.edu. I'm pretty easy to find. I got a bunch of videos floating around.
Fantastic. I'll make sure I
And
put them on the
PubMed.
podcast.
A ton of publications if you're interested in that level of all kinds of things, from bioinformatics to digital health to, I mean, I ran PCRs back in the day, so you're welcome to go look me up.
Well, thank you very much, Dexter. Thank you for your time. And I'll see you at the next party.
Likewise. Have a good night.
Thanks.